And we were having a few collywobbles down in the hall, but I have to say the Minister also arrived absolutely on time. So it gives me very, very great pleasure to welcome onto the platform David Willetts, the Minister for Universities and Science. David has been in this position since the beginning of the coalition government. There have been some thoughts he might be moved, but we're delighted that he has not been moved because he's been doing a tremendous job managing the science budget and fending off the Treasury so that we've been able to keep it reasonably much intact. He was himself at one time a Treasury insider, so perhaps that helps. But he also gets on very well with his boss at BIS, my friend, a Liberal Democrat friend, Vince Cable. And only this last Saturday, I was at a dinner at which Vince was speaking, and he was singing David's praises. David, we're immensely pleased and honoured to have you here at this conference and to celebrate the achievements of the Science and Heritage Programme. So, can I now hand the platform over to you?
Well, thank you very much, Margaret. I think in that brief introduction, you touched so many different political notes. So let me assure you, indeed, I enjoy working with Vince, and I am indeed happy to be here today and still be in my post. Let me just reflect briefly on this Science and Heritage Conference and what we're doing. First of all, as Margaret said in her kind introduction, I think the background for this is that we do value and support research, and our research base is something in which we in Britain can take great pride. And it's why, in tough times, at an age of austerity, we're very pleased that we've both been able to maintain the cash spend, the so-called science ring fence, of £4.6 billion. We've been able to see a steady rebuilding of our capital programme, and that's going to go ahead at a very high level. And we're also supporting the Technology Strategy Board as well with an increasing budget. And although the science ring fence could give the impression that that is simply physical sciences or physical and social sciences, let me be absolutely clear. That is all of our research activity across all our different disciplines, and we have maintained the balance between them. So we're funding the Arts and Humanities Research Council broadly steady in cash terms, just as we're doing with engineering and physical sciences. And indeed, whenever we look at the strengths of our science and research activity, it's absolutely clear that what we achieve as a medium-sized economy is nevertheless excellence in a whole range of different disciplines, and there's virtually no big challenge in the world that is going to be tackled simply through the framework, the prism of one particular discipline. And so we're very keen as well on multidisciplinary issues, and there is the arts and humanities have a crucial role in all that. So we are not reductionists who choose to support one discipline at the expense of another. So I just wanted to make that clear at the beginning. I think what we are doing today and tomorrow, and I'm sorry I can't be with you for very long for this, but celebrating the Science and Heritage Programme. It's been a great success, and let me be absolutely clear, I think we all have a great debt to you, Margaret, to Baroness Sharp, for the crucial role that you have played right from the beginning in that classic report that was produced by the House of Lords Science and Technology Committee back, was it in 2005, 2006? I think you actually coined the expression heritage science, and you put that on the agenda. As a result of the work that you did then, the programme was created, the Science and Heritage Programme, and I was on the receiving end of your personal commitment when you had, quite rightly, a follow-up inquiry into this only a few months back, again, chivying us and making sure that we in BIS, with responsibility for research, were working with DCMS to ensure that this was a successful programme. So I think we all have a debt to you for really putting this on the agenda and ensuring that it's properly funded. And it has been a great success. I should also pay tribute to May Cassar for her excellent work as the Programme Director for the Science and Heritage Programme. And what we see it as having achieved is bringing together arts and humanities researchers with scientists in order to further the understanding and preservation of collections and artifacts of national and international importance. It's helped to maintain access to our past in a period of not just financial pressure and financial change, but also with literally a changing physical environment, and climate change and changes in the temperature and environment and the humidity in which some of our objects have to be preserved is another great challenge, and you really put that on the agenda. There's been progress in non-invasive archaeological and preservation techniques, enabling our cultural heritage to be studied and protected without being disturbed. And also there is, and we shouldn't be embarrassed about this, an economic payoff. Our heritage is one of the reasons why we have such a vibrant and healthy tourism industry, which brings over £50 billion to the British economy. And for me personally, I'll just put at the end of that list two other crucial things. First of all, some of you may know I have a great interest in the intergenerational contract. I wrote a book about it called The Pinch, available at all good bookstops and on Amazon. And for me, one of the most powerful arguments is quite simply, this is an inheritance that we are the beneficiaries of, something that previous generations have passed on to us. And we have an obligation, as a very minimum, to pass it on in equally good condition to future generations, and ideally to enhance it. And my view is that that contract between the generations is one of the things that keeps a society going and holds a society together, and preserving our heritage and passing it on is one of the crucial ways in which any society shows it understands that intergenerational contract. And then also, we are now past the 50th anniversary of the great C.P. Snow broadside about the two cultures. Well, he delivered his lecture. The real broadside was F.R. Leavis's response that was still, reading it many years later, was savage in his response to Snow. And there are sadly still abiding problems in Britain of the two cultures. I think some of it goes back to the specialisation that happened so early on in our education. So many people who, when they choose their A-levels, are in effect relinquishing at least half of our intellectual heritage when they do so, if they give up on the arts or give up on the sciences. And I always say I want to see scientists with a broad historical understanding. When I go to CERN, and our particle physicists are as good as the German or the French particle physicists, but our particle physicists, by and large, can only speak English. All the other particle physicists are looking at a problem and able to communicate in 2 or 3 languages. Equally, I want people in the arts and humanities who are familiar with maths and mathematical and statistical techniques, because increasingly you will find, even if you're reading a work of history or a piece of political science, you will find regression analysis. Think of the impact of Time on the Cross as a significant historical piece of work which also advanced historical methodology and brought in statistical techniques. So I believe in breaking down the barriers between the two cultures. And this Science and Heritage Programme is one modest contribution to that. People in the arts humanities realising and recognising that there are powerful advances in some of the physical sciences that can be harnessed, and equally recognising that people in the physical sciences having the opportunity of working on cultural and historical programmes. So that's another crucial value to this programme, and it's one of the many reasons why I salute it. Now, I think right from the beginning, before my time, right from the beginning, this was envisaged as a time-limited programme. I think the original proposal was for a time-limited programme. And so that's why we are now marking the end of this particular programme. But I wanted to assure you that that doesn't mean it's the end of support for the connections between heritage and science. Now, I can't and would not wish to instruct our research councils on particular projects that they should do. There is a high level of autonomy in the research community, and quite rightly so, protected by the so-called Haldane principle. And I think you've got Rick Rylance of the Arts and Humanities Research Council speaking to you tomorrow. But there are some very clear indications of how this type of work, even if not this specific programme, this type of work can carry on. Heritage is one of 3 key areas, alongside design and modern languages, which have been earmarked by the Arts and Humanities Research Council for specific support to sustain national capability. Researchers in this area will continue to be able to apply for funding through both the Arts and Humanities Research Council and also the EPSRC and NERC in their responsive mode schemes. If you come up with a proposal, you can always just approach the research councils, and they all still have responsive funding, though of course with very high standards of quality and peer review and impact. There are continuing themes for science in culture and care for the future in the AHRC's programme. And also, and this is something of great significance, and again I pay tribute to May Cassar for this, through Europe there is funding available, has been available through FP7, and I know May was very active in fending off threats, not from this country I hasten to add, threats to this area of research in Horizon 2020, and we very much hope that European funding will continue to be available, and we'll have another EU Council meeting on Horizon 2020 in the next few weeks, and I do take the opportunities either in full session or in bilateral informal conversations to remind people that we need to continue to support the arts and humanities and projects like this. And also, finally, no, actually, I've got 2 other examples, actually. I was going to say, I should mention the continuing investment in our centres for doctoral training. The AHRC have got centres in doctoral training. One of these, led by the University of Hull, is a heritage centre for doctoral training, which should provide support for capacity in this area through training the next generation of heritage researchers. So a lot will carry on. And my final, and I think this really is an optimistic message on which to end, my final point is that we've now got a long-term capital settlement for science and research. We are in 2014-15, our science capital budget will go through the £1 billion mark. It's only been that one previous year recorded when there was a lot of capital was brought forward to be spent in 1 year. So we go through £1 billion in 14-15, and exceptionally, in the summer public spending settlement, the Chancellor made a commitment that capital investment in science and research would carry on, protected in real terms, at over £1 billion a year, year after year, until 2020. And we will be producing, in a while, a consultation document to get the advice of the sector on how that capital should best be spent. It is a great strategic opportunity. And I know that there are people involved in science and heritage research who have their ideas about future capital projects. And of course, there will still be more bids, I know, than we have capital available, but there is nevertheless a very healthy long-term capital provision that will enable us to continue to invest in the physical and other forms of capital that we need in order to maintain world class in this crucial area of science and research. Thank you very much indeed.
The Minister has agreed to take some questions, and we've got, I think, 10 minutes for questions. So can I see if there's any questions from the floor? Yes, Alison. Alison, can you wait for the microphone and say who you are and speak clearly into the microphone? If you hold the microphone just beneath, that's right. Fine.
Good morning, Minister. My name is Alison Richmond. I'm the Chief Executive of the Institute of Conservation. And my question to you this morning is about interdisciplinary and collaborative research that you've spoken of, and we have heard today from many about the value of this interdisciplinary research. And my question is, can you envisage creating a more positive research environment that's more conducive to cross-disciplinary subjects such as heritage science? We know that structuring heritage science around traditional disciplines is problematic, and there is the ever-present danger that it will fall between stools. So how can government help to make structures more receptive to cross-disciplinary research? Thank you.
I mean, there are, inevitably, there are boundaries in public provision, just in private arrangement. You can't just have a sort of everything in a boundaryless world. So inevitably, we do have to structure things around the specific research councils, and universities have to have departments. So there are those boundaries. I don't know what particular obstacles you have in mind. I can assure you that when it comes to the research assessment exercise, although there's a widespread belief in the academic community that it's the exact journal in which you appear that counts, the people, the academic experts themselves who give their time to the assessment panels always assure us that they look at the original research rather than the journal. And this matters because I do know that sometimes getting cross-disciplinary work into the most prestigious journals can be a real battle. And people worry that this will in turn affect the assessments for their research. I'd like to assure you that that is not how the REF is supposed to work. It is not supposed to be based on journal counting. Now, individual university managements may look at journal counting, but as I say, the REF exercise looks behind that. So if there's a good piece of cross-disciplinary research, even if it isn't in one of the most prestigious journals, it can be submitted and it will count and it will be assessed.
Other questions?
Simon Kane, Deputy Director at Birmingham Museums Trust. It's great to hear that we've got secured a £6 billion investment up through to 2020 for capital investment in science, which is great news. But I was just wondering, is there anything you could say to us about the autumn statement? Can we expect anything for heritage science come the autumn?
Well, the position there is that we had a big public expenditure round in the summer. That's where I got this capital settlement I was describing earlier. And the Chancellor doesn't envisage the autumn statement as being another round of public expenditure negotiations. We have basically, as a coalition, we have agreed now public expenditure figures up to 15-16. The two different parties will, I'm sure, want to go into election with their own different approaches to fiscal and policy for the term after that. So it's not realistic to expect the coalition to agree plans beyond 15-16 in general. As I say, we've made an exception basically for capital in two crucial areas, in transport and in science and research. So I think we're unlikely to see significant changes in that area in the autumn statement.
Any more questions for the Minister? Well, can I put one perhaps to you, Minister? I was delighted at your reference to the intergenerational equity issue. And I myself, in the presentation that I made right at the very beginning, stressed also this intergenerational. Do you feel that we're now doing enough in terms of the, so to speak, the overall research that is going into this area to make sure that we are preserving and conserving our so to speak, the current cultural heritage, so that we're going to be able to pass it on reasonably satisfactorily to our successors?
Well, there are individually sort of shocking examples of vulnerable buildings, sometimes even documents that haven't been properly cared for. I think there Britain is ahead of many other parts of the world, and globally there are some real challenges of ensuring that our humanities cultural heritage is protected. There is a lot of exciting stuff now happening in IT. There's a lot of smart ways in which we can now record, every painting in any form of public ownership in Britain, the analysis of texts. So there is a lot more going on in IT. And let me leave you with this futuristic example, which was yesterday. I was given a full set of Shakespeare's sonnets. I was given them in a form that is still incredibly hard to do, though it can be done in Cambridge. It may be the future of librarianship. I was given it in a tiny set of cells at the bottom of a sealed plastic container. I was given it in the form of an encrypted DNA. DNA where the four proteins of DNA have been put into a simple code so that each letter of the British alphabet was a different DNA protein combination, and Cambridge scientists had now recorded Shakespeare's sonnets in that form, and the argument was that most of the technologies we use for data preservation move very fast. I'm sure lots of people here have got family videos that they can no longer exercise because they haven't got a video recorder and player anymore. So one of the problems if you're in librarianship is how you preserve things if you're aiming to preserve something for 500 years or 1,000 years, how you do it in a way that is not too technologically specific. And the argument is that preserving data through DNA, when DNA is a global code, is a future way in which it can be protected. It is also very space effective because you get tiny cells will have large amounts of genetic data. Because remember, there's millions of bits of genetic code in a single strand of DNA. So I've now got Shakespeare's sonnets in my office in that form. And who knows whether in the future it's a way in which we'll be able to protect much more of our heritage. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you, Margaret.